Hello my friends, today we will edit this long exposure and we'll take this image from this into this. Again, we will start with this image and we will end up with this image. So let's go right into it. First of all, let's look at our image, and this was a long exposure, a 3-minute exposure. I took it with my 7R4 f8, 181 seconds and ISO 100. A 24mm with my 24-105 lens. So let's go on to develop, and the first thing I want to do is darken the sky a little bit, bring back some of that detail. Now Lightroom has a wonderful select sky mask and it's selected really well. You see it protected these trees and stuff, but this is not what I want, because if I do this, now it's gonna darken it all evenly, all the way from the top to the bottom, and that just doesn't look as realistic. I wanted to feather it and give it less darkening on the bottom over here. So I am going to reset that, and then you might think, well, Skyler, you can use the linear gradient and just bring down a linear. Well, now if I do that, I am darkening the trees as well, and I do not want to do that either. So I will reset that, and I will be using intersect mask. Now let me explain you how intersect mask works, because it's a very, very powerful tool. Let's say I am selecting the sky and then I want to go over here and to mask to the 3 dots and intersect it with, let's just intersect it with the radial gradient. Watch what happens when I draw my radial gradient. You see that what is red is being masked, and it only masks this part over here, and that is because intersect only masks the parts that overlap. So think about 2 different maskings, and whichever part it overlaps, so you have 2 masks, one on top of the other, that's the only parts it will mask. So that's why we got this part, because this part was the only part that it doubles up from both masks, is from the radial gradient and from the sky. So it only affects this area. So now that we know how intersect mask works, this is what I am going to do. I am going to make a linear gradient, and I'm just going to drag it something like that. And then I will intersect this one. I'll go over here to the 3 dots, go to intersect mask with, and I'll do select sky. So now I'm having a gradient, but I'm protecting all the trees because we did select the sky. So that is wonderful. Now I can just take the exposure down and make a lot more natural darkening of the sky. Something like that looks wonderful. I will get out of this mask and let's assess the image a little bit. What I want to do, I want to add a vignette and darken all around the island here, and then brighten the inside of the island. So I will go back into masking and I will click on this plus button to create a new mask, and I will choose a radial gradient. And I will drag a radial gradient, something like that. Now as you can see, the affected area, it's actually the middle of the island, but I want it to be the outside. So I can go here into mask 2 and click on these 3 dots and go to invert mask 2. So now we just have selected the outside, and I'll just darken it just a tiny little bit, maybe bring the highlights down a little bit, something like that. Now I want to brighten the inside, so I'll go to create new mask and I'll make another radial gradient, something very skinny, just something like that. I'll place it over here. And here I will increase the exposure a little bit, maybe even add some texture and some clarity. And I think that looks wonderful. I think I am done with my masking. And now the next thing I want to do is maybe bring down the highlights a little bit globally. I open the shadows just a touch, not too much. I will increase the whites maybe just a little bit and bring down the blacks to get a little bit more contrast. And then I want to add some vibrance. I will add quite a little bit of vibrance, maybe to 31, but I will bring down the saturation to -7. And that looks good for now. Let's move down, and here into the camera calibration, I want to increase the saturation of the blue, and that's going to bring out all these oranges and warm tones on the foreground. So watch this. When I increase the saturation of the blues, you see everything is kind of coming to life. So I will do that, but my blues are oversaturated now, so I have to go into my HSL to the saturation and bring down the blues a little bit. Now I also want to go to luminance and bring the blues down just to create more drama in the sky, and something like that looks good. And then moving on, I'm not going to do anything with the color grading right now, but I will go to sharpening and I will use the default. I will just mask it, hold down Option, move the masking to the right, and you see I'm just sharpening the island. I do not want to sharpen the water or the back or the sky. And then moving down, I will click Remove Chromatic Aberration and enable Profile Correction. And now I do want to do a little bit of work in the curve tool. I will put it on the white dot over here, that's the luminance. And what I want to do is I want to lift the blacks a little bit. I'll put a point in the middle. Actually, I'll move it back. Put a point in the middle. I want to make sure my midtones and my highlights are not moving. So one in the middle, one in the highlights. And now I'm lifting up the blacks a little bit, something like that. And then I'll bring down the shadows to create more contrast. And you see that this is the before, this is the after. We are getting more contrast. Maybe even bring it down a little bit. And maybe even the midpoint, just a little bit. Something like that looks good to me. So let's see that again. This is the before, this is the after. We can even bring it down even a little bit more. There you go. And now I want to color grade it a little bit, and the way I will do that, I will just do it by using the blue channel in the curve. And what I want to do is just bring up the blues and the shadows. So I'm lifting this corner upwards, and that will put blues in my shadows. And then I'll bring downwards the blue onto the right side into the highlights, and I will add some yellow into the highlights. Something like that. And this is our before and after. This is a color grade I like to do in a lot of my images. It's really easy to do, and I think that blue in the shadows gives it a more cinematic look, and then the yellow in the highlights. If you've ever, go to a museum and you look some of the most famous paintings, they don't have pure whites. The whites are more like a pale yellow. So that's why I took down the blue into the highlights, and that just put a little bit of yellow into my highlights. Now what we need to do is move into Photoshop so we can get rid of these ugly vignettes in the corner. So Command E to send the photo into Photoshop. And now that we have our photo in here, I want to take care of those corners. So I'll just use the patch tool. It's this one over here on the left. And I will just select my corner and drag into a part that I want to replace it with. Very, very easy to do and very, very effective. So I'm selecting, drag to the right. I am selecting my corner, drag it to what I want to replace it with. Command D to deselect, and this one maybe needs a little bit more work over here. Something like that, and here I can see a faint line. There you go, something like that, maybe even here. I need to fix it a little bit, and that corner looks good. All right, Command D to deselect, and the corners look good. Maybe I want to add just a little bit more color into the island, and for that I will use a selective color. And here onto the reds, I will decrease the cyan to add reds. So you see, look at the reds over here on the island. If I take the cyan and I move it to the left, I'm adding reds. So I will do that, and then into the yellow, I will increase the yellows. Maybe this one I'm not gonna go all the way, just about to 61. Then I'll move into the greens, and I don't have greens here, but I have magenta, which is the opposite of green. So if I take this to the left, it will add greens. So I'll just do it. I don't want to get them too vibrant, but maybe to -34. The cyan, I have cyan. If I move this to the right, I will add more cyan. I don't want to make it too saturated, so just about +23. And then with the blue, we don't have blue, but we have yellow, so we know if we move the yellow to the left, we are adding blue. And then this one, I think I don't want to do any of it because I don't want my blues too saturated. And then magenta, we have magenta, and we'll just move this one to the right. I'll do it at 100%. So let's see, this is our before and after adding this splash of color. Now I want to take this image into Luminar Neo and add a little bit of the golden hour from the landscape tool because I feel like that would look nice in here. So what I will do, I will create a stamp layer. That means a layer where it's a picture of everything I've done so far. So for that, I will go Command Option Shift E, and that makes a stamp layer. And now this layer, I will go into Filter, Skylum Software, Luminar Neo. And now into Luminar Neo, I will go to Edit. And then into Landscape, I will just add a little bit of this golden hour. Not too much, but around 30, 34, something, maybe that's too much. Let's go with 30. And then I will just click Apply. That's the only thing I want to do into Neon. So this is our image before the golden hour, and this is with the golden hour. It just gives it that nice sun kiss. And that is pretty much. Now to flatten this image, I will just right click on a layer and go flatten image. And that is our final image. To send it back into Lightroom, we will go to File, Close, and Save. And that should go right back into Lightroom. If we go to the original image and we reset it, that's the image we started with. And then this is the image we ended up after all the edits. I hope this was helpful and you learned something new. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Skyler Ewing, and I'll see you in my next video.